Artist from Oak.
Thank you very much, Mayor, and thank you, councilwomen, councilmen. Appreciate this opportunity. If we have the PowerPoint.
The idea of covering the top of the deck with a very graphic kind of patterning that really animates it and pulls everything together.
You see my picture in your little brochure? Yeah! Guess what? I want your picture to be in the brochure. You see the Phoenix Center down there? Yeah! We don't have any idea what to do with it. We've spent millions of dollars building it, and guess what? It's wide open and empty, so we need your help. What should be on the Phoenix Center? Basketball court. Okay, over here in the back. Right here, you with the glasses. Football field. Young lady. Play skate. Oh, what? Soccer field. 50 hot tubs. A water park. A circus. Now guess what? Who's gonna make that happen? Hey, we're gonna do this. Everybody quiet down. Real quiet. I want you to say something after me. I am the future of Pontiac. Nothing happens without my say-so. So when I get older, I am going to make the city that will change the world.
My question really is, if there is no community plan or vision for the Phoenix Center, why take out a piece of money and not get to where you need to get to in order to build something that's going to generate revenue in the future and come back? And so I understand the structural repairs are somewhere around $17 million over the next 10 years or whatever from the estimates that they've been able to show me. If you're only getting 19.5 in bonds, that only leaves $2 million for improvement, and that's if everything goes absolutely correctly and all those projections are there. My fear is that because I think we're doing this backwards, I think we need to decide how much money we really want to sink into the Phoenix Center and what we want that to look like as a community, and then go from there. If we just want to simply maintenance it, then we need to find out the lowest dollar amount possible to meet the obligations and warehouse it, and then allocate people to do that. If we want to actually use it and have something that the citizens can be proud of, then I think it's going to take more money than what you guys are asking for in this bond allocation. And what I don't want to do is have the citizens think that if the council does vote to issue these bonds, that they're going to have something they can use, and then they find out, no, all that did was bring it up to basic code.
Of course, that's not a finance question, that's a strategic question. And that to do a Shane Park, I don't know how much it costs for Shane Park, but it's a lot more than what we want to spend right now. But you are right. We did do an appreciation when we did that charrette, and we had a $100,000 grant from the Congress of New Urbanism that we did, and some of you participated in that. A lot of people did participate to envision what that development of that part of town with the Phoenix Center garage in place would look like. So that's what's guiding the way we're doing that reconstruction and renovation of that part of town, and it guides some of the other repairs and renovations we're anticipating. In addition to the fact that as we sent out this RFQ, sometimes you just send out an RFQ, which we did, and you just say, fix the concrete and patch it up and do what needs to do to bring it up under code. We did take a little extra time when we sent out the RFQ, because in that RFQ I did put down a segment that said, given the fact that we have done this charrette, and given the fact that as a community we have looked to see what that structure meant to the development of that part of our downtown as a catalyst to the rest of the development of our downtown, I did say to the applicants on the owner's rep that I wanted them to have that in mind when they submitted their proposals. So to that extent, we did take on and did include in that charrette the vision, but what it might be other than just a garage. But right now, what we're doing is just fulfilling the terms of the settlement agreement, which we're bound to do, which you signed on to do, which is going to make sure that we abide by the principles so that we aren't in default of that settlement. As she's staying on the amphitheater at the town hall, and talked about how much she wished we could bring back the kind of activities and festivals and concerts and things we had on the amphitheater. And she remembered some of the events she had participated in, and many in the crowd were struck by that nostalgia because we too remembered being on the amphitheater and wondered what it would take to get back there again. So that's what I'm here to tell you about in terms of the steps that need to go forward and what council we want you to do and consider, and what we want the public to know about and where we are in this process. I have for you on the picture, and some of you may notice if you've been out between the hours of 9:30 a.m. and 9:30 p.m. and 6 a.m., you will see that we have lit up the awning on the Phoenix Center with a light show that is very beautiful. One of my staff did capture this picture. And this we did at the town hall as just a semblance of what can happen if we go ahead and maintain the Phoenix Center and meet the terms of the settlement, which we have labored with and made sure that we have hammered out the terms of this settlement. The lawsuit that was started by the emergency manager took 4 years for us to work this out with the team that I had set up, the attorney's team. But now the ball is in our hands. We have before us the opportunity now to maintain the Phoenix Center in our ownership, not losing it as we had other structures in the past, such as the Silverdome and the community centers and Lot 9 and the water treatment center and all that. But we must move forward according to a deadline that has been set by the court to satisfy the settlement. So we talked about that at the town hall, and we had a number of presenters who were there. One of the presenters was the project manager that we have hired from ALC, who has brought in a number of architectural designers who have done renderings. You know, sometimes we can talk about what might happen if we do the Phoenix Center and maintain it and bring it back to code and again bring that activity, not only to be able to use it again as a parking garage, but also to connect it to our downtown to have other activities there. And so these are some of the renderings that were brought back by the architectural designers. Go back to the rendering, okay, please. And they're also seen on the display that we have outside here, in the mobile display with the drawings and things. These are just concepts. Nothing here is cast in stone, but this just gives you a picture, Pontiac, of this is your facility. And you can take and do with it what you want, but we don't have to lose it. Now, one of the things that we talked about at the town hall was many people who are leaders that you recognize who also remember what a jewel this is and why we should maintain it. And I'm going to quote a couple of people who are here right now, including, I see on this document that I bring for you, I'm not showing any videos, but I'm showing this document that was presented last year talking about the Phoenix Center and the Ottawa Towers. And we have here Council President, who says, and I quote him, this is his picture right here, "I have fond memories of events at the Phoenix Center with my family and feel strongly that we must save this jewel of our community." I have here also, I see Mark Collins is here in our audience. He was a council person, I guess, when he was quoted. And this is his picture, and he was quoted as saying, "This Phoenix Center was built to provide parking for downtown businesses, and it has a large recreational space with an attractive amphitheater. Its future could one day include community events like concerts, once again playing at the amphitheater, attracting thousands of people to downtown." So that's the image that we want to bring back. And at the presentation, the project managers talked about the timeline that we must move on in order to meet the terms of the settlement. If we don't meet these deadlines, and that's encroaching upon us, then we go back to court. Then it's possible that we lose it, and we don't get rid of the damages that the Ottawa Towers sued us for. We end up paying for that anyway.
in some cases, cities that have failed coming out of the manufacturing proposition are now valued by just having such a capacity in their municipality. And we don't have one in Pontiac, but the Ottawa Towers has one, if you can believe that. Both towers have this capacity. And the value of that is that people will move from places that don't have it, especially young corporations, just for that capacity to be available to them. And it runs at 1 gigabyte, and I think that's important to include. So not only is it a fiber-optic connection, it runs at 1 gigabyte speed.
Okay.
Which is an incredible fast.
I don't know what 1 gigabyte means to the average person, right?
Okay.
I know what it is because you told me what it is.
Right.
So how do we say like record speed or like top speed?
Well, that's a good question. How would one describe that so that the average person would recognize it?
It's not just high speed, it's special.
Yeah, it's ultra high speed.
Ultra high speed. How about that?
Let's go with that.
Yeah.
Ultra high speed.
Okay.
And I'm just thinking through, I mean, I have some talking points buried somewhere that has more of the asset aspects of
6 acres of plaza. No.
This tower also has a kitchen, a Class A kitchen. And what that means is it can serve 2,500 people. The entirety.
2,500?
2,500.
Okay.
Okay, and that's significant because of what it means is it can feed both towers, the workers. And I think another part of this is the fact that when we talk about the the Ottawa Towers as an innovation district, and we talk about anchor tenants, they have the state of Michigan as an anchor tenant. I think that's important, because you can't get much better of an anchor tenant than the state of Michigan. Now, what they do within the context of that tower, well, that's a different discussion, but nonetheless, as an anchor tenant, the state of Michigan is pretty solid. And it represents several hundred jobs. I think something to that effect should be bulleted. New jobs.
Could be home to
Right.
thousands of new jobs.
Right.
Mhm.
And just to give you an idea of the investment versus jobs formula here in Pontiac, General Motors got a lot of PR more recently over the last couple of months for having put in $124 million worth of renovation to powertrain and the engineering side of their equation here in Pontiac that still exists. And of that $124 million would have produced 116 jobs, none of which were open. They were already jobs that they'll be moving people from, as opposed to new jobs. So it's just a thought there. 124 million nets, almost 0 jobs. And here we're advocating for not quite such a deep investment, and we're already talking about several hundred jobs. Most of them, if not a good deal of them, will be new jobs. And again, I think these are the underlying foundational elements that speak volumes about the asset that represents. That also, the backstory is, well, how come this isn't happening? Well, it's because it's been prevented from happening. which gets back to that original story, you know, of the damaged proposition. But I think we ought to keep this just on the positivity side.
Yeah, we're gonna have, and just to like zoom out, we're gonna have like a couple bullet points, you know, like we can't really get too
Yeah.
deep into it.
Yes.
So here's what I'm gonna have. I'm gonna use Innovation District at the top and have the rendering. I'm gonna say the assets of Ottawa Towers, bullet points, 8 floors, 180,000 square feet of open office space, ultra-high-speed fiber-optic infrastructure, Class A kitchen that can serve 2,500 people.
Awesome. Awesome.
Perfect.
Future-
Yeah. And I'm just
Sorry?
trying to think through here.
Oh, wait, she had one more.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Sorry.
Future,
Future home to thousands of new jobs.
perfect. Right?
And then
No?
I want to say,
I
imagine
I
the
think you need to
possibility.
say several hundred, not thousands.
Okay,
Several hundred,
home to hundreds.
yeah, several hundred.
Okay.
Okay.
Then I want to say, imagine the possibility, high-tech startups.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Incubators, accelerators, those all point up to that, those all point up to that statement about what an innovation district is. Which, and I don't think we should miss, one of the key elements of an innovation district with regards to anchor tenants and colleges and universities.
Yep.
And the reason that's important is on the 24th of September, we're scheduled to have the mayor and the president of Oakland University, which is leading an initiative in Pontiac called OU Pontiac. They're coming on a special visit with reference to the Pontiac Moving Forward initiative and the OU Pontiac initiative on behalf of the federal government. And they're visiting potential economic development hotspots in Pontiac. And I will say to you, they're not going to any other places that are going to be hotspots. They're going to HP, Hewlett-Packard. They're going to
M1.
M1 Concourse, which is a condominium facility for
Cars.
Dream Cruise cars, and I'm not sure of the other venues, but needless to say, coming to the Ottawa Towers is the spot. And so we'll have an opportunity to press something in their hand as they're leaving. I expect they'll be there for 25 minutes. They'll get a tour, take them upstairs. I'll take them out on the second level and so forth and so on out on the Phoenix Center, and they're gone. But what we leave in their hand is what they'll walk away with. So if we can just mention something about colleges and universities, what could we say?
I think we can just say colleges and universities. So I'll add that too. Imagine the possibilities, high-tech startups, incubators, community gardens, colleges and universities.
Perfect.
Perfect.
Okay. I think I have what I need for that.
Okay.
Done. So I'm going to move Monica's quote there.
Motion fails, which brings us to the art presentation.
Council and citizens. All right, special presentation item 5 is something that you had asked for last week, Council, and it relates to the agenda item number 19, in which we wanted to start the process of finally starting the repairs and the improvements and the delayed maintenance on the Phoenix Center, and that before you voted on that, you wanted to have some more specifics from Alk in terms of a presentation and a pictorial plan. So they're here to do that, and here to do the presentation, I do have John Ballant, our DPW director, as well as Jim Munciano. Did I say that right? From all right, and if Vince Leonardis, who is speeding from another event, gets here in time, he was also listed to be part of this presentation, and John Clark may have some additional comments. So those are the presenters for this particular special presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council President, City Council. As the Mayor had mentioned, we do have a presentation here regarding the Phoenix Center and kind of showing what it is, what it was, what it is, and what it could be. So going into the first, now you have a presentation in front of you. You guys should have a copy of this. Some of it may be hard to read from up here. I see it looks like a little lights glares on that. The Phoenix Center, I don't know if you, just a little brief history of the Phoenix Center. It was the whole idea, all the sketches, the whole idea was from a gentleman named C. Don Davidson, who was a Pontiac native. A quote from him was, "Pontiac is a microcosm of the rest of America and its problems. To run from those difficulties is to merely pass on a more difficult set of problems to future generations. If people aren't willing to fight the good fight, blight will spread all over the county, and the value of Oakland County will be killed because people chose to ignore the problems. If we cannot solve our problems in Pontiac, they cannot be solved in other cities." So, and I'll skip to the.
Oh my God.
Yeah, these were from a while back, though. These are not necessarily recent quotes, but obviously we have some council people, some current council people, some downtown business people, and I read from Amir Diaza. He owns a couple clubs downtown. "We should all be working together to bring back our downtown. The legal assault on Ottawa Towers and the Phoenix Center could send terrible things to the business." Basically, he's trying to get this Phoenix Center back up and running. Mickey Cook, the Phoenix Center is a unique, one-of-a-kind gem, that was a hub for community events and provided parking for downtown businesses. This is actually something that we need in our downtown. We're going to need additional parking with new businesses coming in, and the on-street parking and all the other private parking lots just aren't going to do it in the future.
Item number 8, which is consultant's report on options for financing the Phoenix Center repairs, renovation, maintenance by terms of settlement approved by City Council on October 30th, 2018. Presentation by Ronald C. Litcomb, Robert Byrd, John Clark.
Hi, good evening, Council President, members of Council. My name is Ron Liscomb of Miller Canfield, and we've been here a couple times, and I know in our previous presentations to you that there was some information or some questions that you had with respect to, the Phoenix Center improvements and what options are to finance those improvements. So we wanted just to provide you with some of that information, to help you, make a better informed decision with respect to whether or not to issue the bonds. So as you recall, under the settlement agreement, there were a couple different types of payments that had to be made to the plaintiffs. Well, payments that had to be made to the plaintiffs, and then some payments that had to be made by the city.
The second reason I'm here tonight is I need you to show the same guts when it comes to this bond issue. Do not strap us with that and put our budget in a position where there are things that we may not be able to do from the general fund because we got a bond issue on us. Please do not support a bond issue. You had another idea of putting out an RFP to see if there were developers who would be interested. That's the best idea, and it has not been pursued like it should have been. That's in an opportunity zone, and investors can get a tax credit if they come and help us with that. So I'm asking you, please, don't approve a bond issue for the Phoenix Place. Stick to your guns and your original idea. Thank you.
last presentation of the day, Phoenix Center update regarding RFP bids for public-private partnership. Madam Mayor.
Yes, Council, and once again, I want to commend our Deputy Mayor for carrying on this Blight program. We're going to have a Blight-free event next spring to commemorate what we have done as a city to be committed to take this blight from our neighborhoods. But what I come before you to present this evening is about Phoenix Center, to give you an update on where we are with that process. This is something we're going to bring to every council meeting. This is probably the most important issue for the city right now. One of the reasons this is important because time is mounting here for council to act on this, because you know we have a settlement agreement terms that we have to meet. Some of you were able to talk to Judge Gerald Rosen, our court-appointed mediator for this particular lawsuit that we had settled, and he came, and for the ones of you who weren't there, and for the general public, to know that he had come and visited us because he was concerned that the city had not moved forward in that 2 years for the to get to the settlement terms. So he has said that this is a good settlement, he thought, and for the council to delay action and to risk a default on the settlement requirement terms would be like, and I use his words, handing the keys to the city treasury to the owners of Ottawa Towers. So I thought I would just wait. I'm going to give an update.
No, let me clarify something.
Yes.
We're not going to be talking about the Phoenix Center at every council meeting. So I don't want you to put that out to the public that there's going to be Ottawa Towers discussion at every council meeting. That's what you just stated, Madam Mayor. So what I want to be clear on is an update means new information.
Yes, Council
You spent
President.
the first 2 minutes of your presentation talking about the past. All I'm saying is you asked to be on the agenda for update about the public-private partnership, not to melee the city council and what decisions we're making.
Yes, if you will listen to the whole predicate that I'm trying to establish, I'm trying to put this in a format that people can understand the whole condition and why we're talking about that. So we're going to give you an update on what is happening in terms of this process. This has been quite a long process since November 1st, when the council first voted to approve the settlement agreement. And one of the things that's going on right now is, you know, we have chosen AUK for the owner's rep, but the next phase was to choose a architectural design company. The bids have gone out for that, and bids have come in, and we're now going to leave it right there for us. Ariel, please. Those bids have come in, and now the team is looking at those bids to see about choosing those. But there is no way to pay them until, of course, council decides on the financing. And the other thing, the process that's going on, is the fact that council did ask us, and this was supposed to run concurrently with the financing decision, and that was to put out bids for public-private partnership. Now, we did do that to be coherent with what the process was you wanted us to do, and those bids will be ready, and the bids will be open next week, early next week. I went ahead and got this one reviewed because of the time and the essence that we have here. I wanted to keep moving forward to show council that we're doing our job as administration to move forward and give you the information as we get it in. Now, the importance of this, once again, is that, go to the next slide, would you please? In terms of the time frame that we are in, go to the next one, please. All right, the date that we're on, just to establish the time frame. In November of 2018, council accepted the settlement agreement. The end of the 2-year period to do the Phoenix Center repairs or risk default was 2 years. A year and more has already elapsed, so we actually have just 1 year left to get to November 1st, 2020, by which time the settlement terms must be met, or risk default. Now, what does default mean? Go to the next one, please, Ariel. Default means that the city could risk going back to court, and at that point, it's very likely that the city would be served with a judgment levy. Judgment levy of $30 million would be visited on every man, woman, and taxpayer in the city of Pontiac and property owner. And that judgment levy and those kind would have to be paid in 1 year. So I'm trying to avoid that. And I think because the time is mounting, because that year has gone by without much motion here, that we need to move forward, council, and we're going to continue to present that to you because it's not something that we want to have happen for the city.
And resilience in Pontiac. Tomoka and Shannon. Build resilience, raise awareness, to stay, to go, to stay. We knew that if we wanted to get something done, we would have to take matters into our own hands. So we decided to stand up for what our children desperately needed. E-book quotes? No. E-book realities, Pontiac realities. If the parents in Pontiac work together to get their kids more involved in community centers and boys and girls clubs, we could bring the old Pontiac back. Back here, now, Pontiac, home. Even though nothing in life went my way, I still turned out to be the luckiest man in the world. Efforts, ongoing university community partnership. To do what? To raise awareness. To do what? Get rid of the negative impact. To do what? Get rid of the negative impact of toxic stress. On whom? Children.
And tell us, if you had $1 million, what would you spend on for the youth? The major thing right now, though, is we don't have a comprehensive plan, and the process is broken. And so hopefully, if there's a grant of people working, I guess the mindset needs to shift. We need to start somewhere, and then we can grow and ramp up. For whatever reason, people want the whole thing already solidified before we can start somewhere. There's programs that OU does, that the Art Experience does, that Pastor Payne does, that Ryan does, and so we haven't been able to get to the table with a plan and to designate a site. And so we've got all these committees doing a myriad of things, but we haven't got as a community to say, okay, this is going to be the temporary location for the first year that we're going to use, and then if we have to build a site going forward or whatever, we're going to do that, and then let's get programming for kids. The problem is we're about to reach a deadline, and politics has gotten involved because we're up against election season, and so it's creating something that doesn't need to be there. And hopefully, through this Robert Woods, maybe this is an ideal steering committee to kind of navigate from between the entities that can't navigate. What I'm saying is, there's no clear collaboration between the council, the administration, or whatever. We don't have staffing to do that. And maybe a group like this, it doesn't have a necessary dog in the fight, can help facilitate that conversation in a way that our kids get a good product. Because right now, the product with the kids is what's suffering with all of this red tape. Because just like you pulled out the millage, right? Yeah. There needs to be something from the city attorney that says that this is where this can be, this is where that can be, period. And then put the programs in line with that. We haven't even been able to sit down and really have a conversation to make that kind of thing happen. So I don't know where we go. I know you said on several things, but why would we do that?
Well, why? Children need to develop. Children need authentic voices. Whose voices? Children. Whose voices? Community. Community? Children to do what? To communicate hope and build resilience.
So we need to get more information out. And that's the purposes of
You got to speak up a little bit
I'm
more,
sorry?
Jim.
I got to get a teacher's voice?
Yep. And here is a picture, the material they passed out. You've seen these in the community and around. You've seen those. Who do you know uses them? Who uses them? Go ahead.
People who are 65 years or older.
Yeah.
She's right. Do you have any personal connections?
So is it possible that they're not going to the right places?
I think because mainly the senior citizens use them. But there's a lot more youth in Pontiac than there are senior citizens, so we don't have access to them as much as they do.
So how do we alter that? How do we help you gain access, and how do we change destinations so that they reflect where you need to go?
I mean, I guess it could just start off with getting more information to like the schools and things like that, so that they know where to go to, and then you can branch off locations and things like that based off of how many kids are calling, and then you know a central location recommendation.
So we're going to be going into the community as Ms. Natchez represented in making that effort. Will we find you at those kinds of meetings?
As much as I possibly can, I will try to, given that I'm about to become a college student.
Ideally, I think, since this is, preparing for the future, transit for the future. How many of you know about mass transit? Mass transit is a good thing.
Do we know what mass transit is? Okay, and that's not necessarily something that is weird because who in here does know what mass transit is? Okay, what is mass transit?
Like buses, trains, hyperloop.
Okay, so like
That's more than mass transit. He knows. So with mass transit in mind, meaning there's a big movement of people back to cities. So one of two things has to happen: more parking structures or mass transit. Which one? Young people such as yourself are going to be moving to cities? You're going to bring a car? They don't usually bring cars because it costs more than it costs the car to park it. So that's probably not the answer, right? What is the answer? I need to go from point A to point B. What's the answer? How do I get there? Boom. Connector buses. Exactly. See, so we're building for the future, and it's about you and not about me, right? Okay. So we need those thoughts. If I were in my city, what and how would I get?
I forgot one thing in my presentation. There's a survey in there that's supposed to be from the children. I'm glad you two were sitting there because I forgot this. The children weren't really truly asked what kind of a program that they want. And if you look at that and look at the questions on the survey, it talks a little bit what they're interested in, that sort of thing. But we need to go to the population that are going to be the customers of the program that we're going to do. That's the children. We had a small charrette over at the ITA. And we talked to them about CPP, the transportation. We talked to them about what would you like to see as far as the youth millage. We got to start going to those that we're coming up with stuff for to do it. And lastly, no question, I support a youth program. All through that document, it talked about how a youth program could help stop juvenile delinquency and crimes. But there's another part to it. It could even be better if we enter in some kind of partnership with the school district as we're trying to prevent juvenile delinquency and all of that. We need to work together, the school district and the city of Pontiac. Again, I trust you, council people. I trust you're going to make the right decision for the people. I trust that you will not tax us for a vague program. I trust you. And so that's all that I have to say. Thank you very much for giving me another opportunity.
Thank you.
And they were having a wonderful time. And then something happened. What do you think happened?
Effort, persistent investment. A picture of resilience emerges from those who persisted to invest in Pontiac. Digital design, thinking, platform, film viewing, and the Facing Project. Trauma, dialogue, written and the spoken words. Power, empowerment. Build resilience, raise awareness. To stay, to go, to stay. My neighborhood. Bring Pontiac back. And my question for you is, how does the digital design thinking platform, film viewing, and the Facing Project help you explore the intersectional experiences in distressed communities with your children and elders? Brigana.
To say thank you for being here, and we appreciate you as a community to say we are going to put these dollars into our schools. So at this time, we have note cards and we will answer any questions. Heidi will to purchase flexible furniture is what it's called, where they can move around and bend back. And you know how sometimes I had ADHD or have ADHD, and I just remember wanting to always be able to stretch and move, and these flexible pieces of furniture will allow a child, instead of getting angry or antsy, they can lean back in the chair. It's just little things like that that we can hone into to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the whole child. We're going to have 2 pilot classes through Vice President has asked the board to agree with a $5,000 expenditure to test out 2 classes where we're going to have the aid, the lighting, and just see how it works with students needing to remove themselves from the spaces and go to these trauma-free classrooms. So all of this is going into the thought process when we talk about bond funding. And we'll turn it over to Sean at this time for questions. Trauma that we are experiencing. So we're trying to bring them some training. This is on the horizon as we start to talk about how do we address trauma and build resilience. When I watch the film, The Resilience, I realized that I experienced trauma during my adult life and did not get the counseling that I needed when my son Trey passed 5 years ago. He was 10 years old. And so that film raised the awareness for me that not only do adults need some counseling, because that we took our staff through that process, but our students do. And we do not have those type of wraparound supports right now in our district. Are we moving towards that? Yes, but we have to get them trained. And we have to talk about how that looks in regards to them being able to recognize when a child is experiencing trauma and may be acting out. So we're just broaching how we're going to address trauma and turn our schools into trauma-informed schools.
Kelly, if you have those trauma rooms, you have got to have a professional trained in trauma for those kids, or their trauma will replicate from each other.
Absolutely. So that's why we're only starting with 2. We do have 1 principal, Mrs. Devison, over at Kennedy, who has been trained, who will train some of our others. And then Dr. Eccles is working with sending some of our other staff, our behavior interventionists, to the training. So this whole trauma piece is really on the cutting edge. It's brand new. People didn't even know they were walking around with trauma. So really within the last year or 2, we have recognized that we're experiencing issues with our students that are having some deep-rooted trauma, post-traumatic issues that we have not addressed for many years. And so that's now the discussion that the ISD is having and many other school districts. Yes.
I think they should have kept it a water song because it helps the world. Because the earth is dropping.
I didn't. Okay.
Let me get mine. I'm gonna do my water song first.
Okay, good.
Okay, make it with your kids if they are not feeling good.
Of this action right right? Everybody's rolling up to get the stickies on the board, so you want to get a good shot.
Restaurant.
That's a good shot, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's see if we can get there.
Can you guys please stop giving me the comments?
About.
Just put it somewhere. That was a blanket. Like it because like you can you can be creative and like think of more stuff about like that you want to do like for the park or like for your career when you get older. And I think it's just good that this is that Monica and Jim let us come and like make the world a better place.
Yeah, and by Jim and Monica opening this opportunity and asking for your help, you're helping them. So it's like we're working together, we're collaborating, and we're helping each other to make a big impact on the whole community.
This is
Yes.
the best fun that I had in my whole entire life.
You like it?
Wow. I like helping people.
You like helping people?
Living in the city. We're just living in the city. Oh, living in the city. Well, it's hard, it's hard, it's hard.
Full guys, I'm trying to open one up at Cloud 22 Glassworks, 22 North Saginaw. Until recently, we were going to be okay to try to apply, but Hidden River Park has now become a Kaboom grant nominee, or regardless, they're going to be getting some money for it. And it's hard to say that a park for kids isn't a good idea. I mean, come on, I have kids. But however, I do not want my kids playing anywhere near that park. That park is not the right place for what the city is trying to put there. It's across the street from these potentially wonderful bistro licenses, across the street from my reputable pawn shop. There's a beer and wine store on the corner, and my head shop. It's just not the right vision that I have seen for this downtown. I'm going on 20 years down here, guys. I know I look very young. I have been down here quite some time. And I hate for the downtown to miss the boat with this cannabis initiative. We're doing everything right. There are going to be amazing dispensaries. We had to fight hard to get them in downtown. And now with this park, I call it an area between two buildings that a lot of homeless people like to hang out in, is not the right spot. But one more event, and it's about parking day. I know that they spend a lot of time on it, but in my opinion, it's a farce. It does not work, and it hinders the businesses on Saginaw Street that try to have people park there during their parking day. And if someone wants to play chess, go to our beautiful Hidden River Park. Thank you.
Hidden River Park has been the source of a lot of projects going on. In fact, the neighborhood empowerment projects, I think we got quite a bit of money over the last 2 years to do. And Jim and Monica happen to know a lot about it because they actually brought the idea to us, and we're partners in the grant, we're consultants on that particular grant. So, and I think your idea is well taken because it is multi-purpose. This isn't just, we got 28 parks in the city of Pontiac. Some of them are playground, exclusively playground parks. This is part of a greater idea of developing CNU and all the others that downtown need to have green space, need to have green space. So, which is how you develop the green space. And I think one of the things you brought in was to have a
shipping.
To have a performance.
Yeah, shipping container that acts as a stage.
It's not a exclusive playground park. It also has some other features that make it multi-use, which it has been used.
Item number 13 is some good news, resolution to authorize the mayor to submit and execute the Kaboom Play Everywhere Challenge Grant agreement in the amount of $56,500.00 for the Good Fund and Sound Abounds Downtown Project.
Absolutely.
Ms. Riley.
Good afternoon. I am pleased and grateful to present on item number 13.
The question I have is probably a question for Mr. Chubb. Adding this playground equipment to Hidden River Park, does that affect the medical marijuana provisioning centers that would be designated in that area?
Good afternoon, Council President. To the extent that the park previously did not have playground equipment, and this would turn it into a park with playground equipment consistent with our ordinance, I believe it's 2357, then the buffers that would apply to the park where they previously did not. So if there are eligible properties near the park, the buffers would be created and it could buffer out some spaces.
So is there any way that we can accept this grant with the conditioning of it staying the same as far as the designation? No, what I'm saying is the grant is from Kaboom. We are accepting the money in order to do the facility. Even though it's zoned as a park, it doesn't have any grass. It's not a traditional park in the sense of what our parks are. So I'm just asking.
It's my understanding that there were playground instruments already, and so we already were using the buffer for that park. So it won't change anything with regard to buffers that were already established.
Right.
Yes, Attorney Sharp.
I would imagine just to chime in with what Attorney Chubb just said. If it was a park, it was a park, regardless if there was equipment or not. So therefore, you would still use, as he said, those buffers. So regardless if there was equipment, if it was determined that it was a park prior to, it's still going to be obviously a park, whether there's equipment or not. Correct, Attorney Chubb?
The distinction is with respect to Ordinance 2357, it does distinctly state the buffers apply to a park with playground equipment. And so it typically would only apply to one with playground equipment, but it's my understanding that it was determined that this park already did have such equipment in it, and so none of the buffers would change.
The Hidden River Park never had playground equipment. It had a fountain. Never had any playground equipment since I've been alive.
I'd also like to clarify, the purpose of this grant is a Play Everywhere grant.
Marijuana down there, when you're talking about some for a kid.
What a Play Everywhere grant is, it allows non-conventional play spaces that are not necessarily designated or allocated as that. So you equip that area with play space, but it's not a traditional play equipment. What it is some musical instruments that are there that have elements of play, but it is non-conventional play equipment that will be provided there.
So just from an enforcement perspective, receiving this grant, putting this non-traditional playscape or whatever it is, does that then change the definition or not? Because my thing is, we should be able to accept this grant, not change the definition, and just put this equipment in the park. That's my thought, but I need to make sure that that's legal.
And speaking to John Baylant, we installed playground equipment back in January, and so all of the buffers or children's equipment in January, so all of the buffers have been applied, including this park.
Okay, so is there a motion to suspend the rules?
I move. Support.
Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Taylor Burks?
Yes.
Waterman?
Yes.
Williams?
Yes.
Woodward?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, now we got to vote on it, so. All right, resolution to authorize the mayor to submit and execute the Kaboom Play Everywhere Challenge Grant agreement in the amount of $56,500.00 for the Good Fun and Sound Abounds downtown project.
Move.
Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Taylor Burks?
Yes.
Waterman?
Yes.
Williams?
Yes.
Woodward?
Yeah.
All right, motion passes, which brings us to item number 14.
Downtown, and we've done pilot programs, but this was a very informal that just kind of blossomed from us meeting and saying, hey, let's go tour the city. Ethan, tell us what we did over the summer and what your thoughts are.
So what we did was we wrote notes that what we wanted to do to help the city and what we wanted to add into it. And we put it on these boards, and then one of them said future, past, and present. So, and we came up with ideas to make everything useful, not just say I don't want it and just throw it away. We made something new in life, and we helped it.
Sure. I'll start with the Enterprise Center, and we'll work into digital equity. So I am the digital equity officer here. The Enterprise Center is an economic development nonprofit with a real tech focus. So we have 3 areas of work. One is actually the innovation district itself. The second is research and application development, leveraging the gig, leveraging fiber, leveraging the connectivity we have in Chattanooga. And then this idea of digital equity, making sure that, you know, as we make these investments and bets on the information economy, on kind of what the future can look like, we're not excluding anybody from participating in that future.
My name is Marcus Shaw. I run CoLab. CoLab is our entrepreneurship and venture development organization. So our mission is to help entrepreneurs increase the capability and viability of their businesses here by exposing them to expertise, resources, and community. Our values are really rooted in a maker mentality, diversity, inclusion, and belonging. So we believe that people will operate at a higher level as an entrepreneur if they feel a sense of belonging. And that's really rooted in selfless ecosystem building. And so that is where we really tie into this placemaking concept, and that we believe a physical space that allows people to have their highest sense of belonging, allow them to express their maker mentality and innovation in entrepreneurial ways, which are focused on increasing customers, increasing capital, increasing capacity, will better position the city for economic development. We work on this belief that there's innovation, there's entrepreneurship, and there's economic development, and how we can help people move along that continuum will make Chattanooga a better place.
Yes, so just to tell you guys a little bit about my background, I've lived in 3 different cities now in the state of Tennessee. And after traveling all of those cities and going all the places that I could go, I found that Chattanooga was one of a kind. It was very unique. I, like many others like me, are kind of a good example of how Chattanooga, you know, seeks people out for entrepreneurship and for job placement and for revitalization of these communities, and then how we go through these funnels of help and assistance and community and friendship. And so a lot of us have started in one place, and we found ourselves in completely different places. Because Chattanooga has such awesome resources like the Tomorrow Building that is there to serve for people that are like me, single, young, innovative, from a different place, have never been here before, but the Tomorrow Building sits in the middle of downtown. And so when I moved here, I had never seen architecture and places and spaces that served quite the way that Chattanooga has done that. And so even in the Tomorrow Building, there's, you know, things that I did not have to worry about thanks to Marcus finding that building for me and finding that space and that place. Because again, we're talking about place making. I did not have a place quite like this anywhere else in the state of Tennessee.
Systems course.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Annalie Campos. I teach at the Oakland University here in Rochester Hills. And I teach the global human systems and another class which is called global cities. And what my design for this class, a slice of it, is to introduce and bring students to a real city experience. An experience that hopefully would orient them to the realities of cities, and Pontiac being just a stone's throw away from Oakland University. I thought that this Pontiac would be the best place for us to learn about possibilities, opportunities, strengths, weaknesses, and threats presented to a city. And so I basically just bring them for a field trip, ask them to conduct a SWOT analysis, landscape analysis, and it's just very inspiring and interesting to hear students making comments and learning from these field trips. How they bring ideas, especially when it comes to possibilities of what the city of Pontiac could become, given its existing assets, the Phoenix Center, the buildings that have been around and could potentially be renovated. But they also describe many of the spots and many of the, they would say, weaknesses of Pontiac. So just bringing this experience and making them really see and feel the city of Pontiac, instead of just hearing what others said about it, dangerous and not so much going on. They actually come in and bring fresh ideas, and that to me is a good way for not just bringing awareness to them of the existence of Pontiac, but also a lot of ideas that they can bring into a conversation, especially as we look out.
Leonidas from Oak.
Thank you very much, Mayor, and thank you, Councilwomen, Councilmen. Appreciate this opportunity. We have the PowerPoint. We distributed late last week for your package the presentation that we have this evening. If we take a look at the status, our settlement agreement has been signed by the mayor and city council regarding funding, that we are projecting approximately 8-month delay in the availability of funds. The intent is that this is part of the regular status report update to show everybody where we're at in regards to, number one, the timeline. And this timeline we've been operating off of since we were brought on board. This was actually part of our proposal. What we've indicated is some information on this timeline to help us keep track of things. We are now in the midst of soliciting participation by architectural and engineering firms for the design work required for the renovations of the Phoenix Center. As you can see on our timeline, we're running approximately 4 months late with that. We've had the proposal request prepared. That was distributed to City Council back in, I believe, late July. So you've seen what we're getting prepared to go onto the street. We've been soliciting interest with the architectural firms. We have 5 firms that are very interested in the project. And once it's posted, working with the city, the DPW director will have that out for firms to review and then help prepare their proposals. So with that,
was met. Now we have less than a year to do that. We had 2 years when we started out, but we've gotten to this point and we have less than a year. So the next step on that we had to present to you was they need the architectural engineering studies. And Vince has told you all about what that is, and he'll tell you the timeline of that. So that is $659,000, which now is $942,000 that you have said that we needed to do. That's part of the construction phase, and council, you need to find a way to finance this. All right, the next slide, and I'm going to go right over to the financing opportunities, because as time goes on, there's some additional opportunities. Now, you said there's nothing there that we hadn't shown you but one opportunity. No, we've shown you any number of financial opportunities. And I'm going to outline those. If you look at them, I won't read them all for time, but you will see that these have been presented to you and at various times. And, I think I don't know whether council has to pick, wants to pick anything there, but a lot of people have said that some of those are not good for the population, such as the judgment levy is not good for the population, or taking it all from the general fund is not a good. So it's not that, we haven't presented them to you. It's just that you have to choose something. And if you don't like the ones that we have given you, then maybe you'll find something else. But we did look to see whether public-private partnership is available right now, and so far there isn't.
What we started to do with this initial summit, just bringing everybody together, has attracted, it's gone from this big to establishing a CPP to this big, where you've got all these organizations within the city of Pontiac that are coming together. And I talk about it, in my head, I see this big board, and there are gears that are all over the board, the schools, those nonprofits. And as each day passes and more conversations are had and more people, they're all together, and it's just a matter of time before they're going to go, and then the whole thing's just going to start moving.
Collaboration impact. Good. Plus, it's sustainable, and you get everyone's ideas at the table, and when you look at it, it's significant that you come together and stay away from isolation, because one idea by itself dies.
I do have a couple of questions. Tim and as well, Pat, you're coming from the automotive sector, from a supply chain proposition. So can you give us an idea of what that is about in terms of how we might apply some of that knowledge and expertise in terms of your passion and future engagement?
I guess I think Pontiac would be a great hub for tier one, any tier auto supplier really, with all of such a strong concentration of automotive in the area, and with plants close like GM's Orion plant, and then there's just there's so much around here that I think Pontiac would be a great area to hold something like that.
And so does location have anything to do with that?
Definitely on the, especially in the tier ones area. I previously worked at Next Year. They built steering systems for all the OEMs, and we were based out of Saginaw, and that was pretty much everything that is going to be going directly into a car is going to be based out of either Michigan or Mexico for Jeep manufacturing.
So the traditional location proposition still holds true, even as we morph into a 21st century endeavor. Yeah. Great, that's great to know.
Just because of the timing needed with everything, everybody's trying to lean out their manufacturing processes, especially at the OEMs. So it's timing's crucial, and anything getting held up, if you're coming across the border from Mexico, from Canada, there's always that risk that your parts aren't going to be there and you're going to shut down production.
So does rail still have a value in the it does. Great.
Yeah.
Great.
I used to also work at the GM Detroit Amtrak plant, and we had trains coming in, I think, multiple times a day with car parts that would be going right on the lines.
Great, that's good to know. That confirms my thinking there. And Angelo, from the education point of view, there probably isn't, if we think of the underrepresented population in Michigan and the various places where we have concentrations, that's a universal problem. And my question is, we spend more money than anyone else in the world on education, and we're 31st in the world. So that suggests, and the piece of results just came out on Tuesday, which are the kind of contraction of understanding regarding success internationally. And we're 31st in the world, and we're spending more than anybody else in the world, which seems like a contradiction. And obviously it isn't about the money, it's about the way in which we're going about it. So any thoughts about how we might change the way in which we provide education, or change the way in which the instruction model is? This is a great example of a really good instructional model, what we're doing today. And yet this is a special proposition. And I'm wondering why we don't have a more inventive, creative expression in every other situation that we engage in terms of education. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think that referencing one of the PowerPoints from last time, I think that the way of education is really important, because a lot of the times when I think that I think that like the way things are taught in the school system are too like blatant and dry. Like it's either if you get it, you get it, and if you don't, you don't.
Great point.
And I think that like there should be like that people always say, oh, I'm a visual learner. I learn best by this, I learn best by that. But even if we tell people that, most of the time the education system is just gonna stick to the one idea is if you get it, you get it, if you don't, you don't. And that's what I think like desensitizes students. So like once they don't get it, they kind of want to check out.
I think another like aspect to that is it could just really, I think it's a culture thing overall. And then also to build on that, school just like there's no practicality to most classes here. Like I've learned it through supply chain. I have teachers who've never worked in like the industry at all. How are you going to teach supply chain with concepts and not real world application?
Interesting. Very interesting.
Hold on a second.
Go ahead, Mayor Waterman.
Yes, Mr. President, what I wanted to relay to the council was that what the city attorney had wanted to present in a closed session was a matter of legitimate concern for the city and for the citizens that should only be discussed in attorney-client privilege like we have previously discussed similar such items. It was regarding litigation that the city faces that of course not should be subject to that kind of privilege, or the people who are privileged should receive that kind of information. And we wanted to respect council by giving them that information, which could have a serious effect for this city and the citizens. So, no, council realized that when they voted not to hear this information. Some of the information does not necessarily have to be in closed session. So I'll have to trust the city attorney to be able to decipher what parts of it he should discuss open session. But if you're not agreeing to hear it here at this meeting, I would strongly recommend that council find a way to receive this in a closed session, because this would not be helpful for the city.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I agree with you. I would prefer that we have a closed session before our budget meeting on Thursday, or is it Wednesday?
So with that, Mr. Bielenard, based upon the premise of approaching this in a way that would meet the repair obligations and not necessarily the entirety of what's been discussed over the last 2 years, could you proceed with your information in the 7 categories to break these down for council as to where these costs are coming?
Yes, I will. And first off, I'd like to thank Council President and Council for the opportunity to present and review this presentation. I am sharing the report that what we did, there's been discussion about spending a certain amount of money to do certain repairs and what can be done. So this project needs to be viewed in its totality. So this report that we're presenting here, the intent is to be concise with the information. As you're aware, there are 7 major components to the project. The structural...
Okay, Mr. Gibbs, if you can turn it over to the people so we can move on.
Yeah, thank you, Council President. I do want to keep this moving for you, but give you enough tools. So I guess if Mr. Lipscomb could give his brief remarks first, Ron will take your remarks at this point.
Sure. Hi. Are you able to hear me now?
We are.
Yeah, great.
Council President, members of the council, I appreciate the opportunity to meet with you tonight. Wanted to just provide a very high-level overview of one of the financing options available to you to finance the improvements to the Phoenix Center. You've had in front of you a couple different resolutions, a couple different times, for a notice of intent resolution and a bond authorizing resolution. These are fairly straightforward resolutions that really authorize the issuance of the most straightforward bonds available to municipalities.
Come in and just buy it out. But I will assure you, I've had conversations with multiple over the last 3-5 days. And without putting together a complete package, there is no white knight here. It's really an option of deciding to meet the terms of the agreement. So with that, we can answer questions. I'm sure there's more explanation. Council President, thank you so much for letting us explain all of that.
Okay, Mr. Gibbs, if you can go and bring your PowerPoint back up. I want to go back to the options, and then I'll start questions, and then I'll turn it over to my colleagues. So yeah, you can skip that slide. Yep, let's start right there. If you can blow that up. Yep.
So, alternative financing.
There you go.
You don't need that one. Very good.
Right. We're fine on that. I guess my question really is bonds. I'm not in favor of private debt financing. I don't know if that works. I do like the public-private solution. And if you can go to the next slide, pass the turn. Yeah, here we go. I am in favor of using any economic tools that we can use to move this property. The property is a city-owned property, so we don't get any taxes off of the parking structure as it is. So there's a package that can be put together
along the way. Hopefully we learn something in our local context and from the network as well. And now we're kind of synthesizing what occurred so that we can both evaluate and add value to the projects that were completed and also help future projects and ideas and other collaborations like this as well.
Okay. Thank you again. Thank you so much for joining us. As Ryan said, this is really a important moment for us to bring all the people together and also really stream it on Facebook and show what we have done with all the projects from the Place Make Earth Challenge. I'm going to be the technical host of all the presentations, just to explain a little bit what are we going to do. We are going to see one presentation for each project. Shortly share the screens and in little blocks. So approximately after 2 or 3 presentations, we will have also a little poll asking questions about our experiences during the Place Make Earth Challenge. So I would like to actually invite first presenter. Let me see. Monica, do you want to be the presenter for Scott to support him with C? Monica, do you want to be the presenter for Scott to support him with pages so Scott can start?
Yes.
Okay.
So you want me to start? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So Monica is your, Monica is your visuals, and you can start speaking now.
I'll give a tee up, and then I'm going to let her talk a little bit about the process and how they brought it in. Hello, everybody, and welcome from sunny South Florida. Place Make SoFlo, as we call it, had a great time and can continue to work on this project we call the Wuhan Declaration. Remarkably, for any of you who may not know, in December of 2018, in Wuhan, China, the government and the community passed a placemaking declaration declaring a goal for inclusion in planning, equity in public spaces, and a variety of empowering concepts that we all embrace. And I found that to be particularly remarkable given the governance format that operates in China. Inspired by that and the 50th year anniversary of Earth Week, an Earth Day founded by Fred Kent, our placemaking founder, we decided to extract from the Wuhan Declaration and discuss in our community what a placemaking declaration will look like for South Florida and how it will bracket into our context of climate change and the surrounding other surrounding community contexts. Along the way, Ryan introduced us to a placemaking U.S. partner, Pontiac Holonomy Incubator, and Monica and her team have done an amazing job of helping us reach out to the community during times of COVID and discover new ways to collaborate online. This then allowed us to zoom out from our community context and to ask the world what a placemaking declaration looked like. And we had participants on online meetings from Cairo and from Singapore and here and there, and along with our local stakeholders. The process itself has been extremely intriguing, and we're still working through, because this is a long-term sort of a policy, so we're still working through all the data and getting to another session where we're going to hone in on the actual language in our local declaration. With that, I'd really like to turn it over now to Pontiac Polanomy and Monica to tell you a little bit about how and why we did what we did.
Well, I guess just a quick overview of how we go about our process is we start with a real simple vision and game plan. And these are the analog boards that we use are behind me here, and we can pop these up at schools, for classrooms, for organizational leadership sessions, and then primarily we've focused on using them to activate the Phoenix Center, which is our kind of project in our downtown, which is a pretty distressed urban community, and a center that has a 6.5 acre public plaza that's been sitting vacant. And so, but we feel very comfortable in shifting them to any context, and working with South Florida group was really fun and engaging, and broadening that out to include Chattanooga. But what we find really interesting is that kids, it can be very inclusive because kids intuitively understand these shapes. And so we can include everyone at every level in a planning process. And we just start with to try to understand the beginning of a project with, what bold steps did we take to get to this vision that we're working toward. And for the Earth Day event, we kind of thought through what it meant to be doing this placemaking declaration within the context of the pandemic, and with these global networks that offer tremendous opportunity to scale and to bring in new collaborations. And so we put those at these circular kind of tent poles, we call them, that are holding up the vision, and then our values, our supports and challenges, and then moving toward the game plan is just documenting stages and tasks, and then just pulling in different contextual articles. Everything's clickable. These sticky notes, anyone that was on our session could add a sticky note, and just from there we just went into a deep dive of what people were going through in their different communities. And we also did a little 6 thinking hats kind of exercise, which is kind of a creative, fun thing to do with groups and also with kids. And, kind of trying to consciously decide what kind of hat we're wearing at any given point, whether or not we're being creative, whether or not we're in our emotions about a situation, or judging it, thinking big picture. White hat is about facts, and the yellow hat's about the optimistic opportunities in any situation. So that's.
Yeah, thanks, Monica. And I'd just like to wrap up by saying that I think that one of the biggest takeaways we got from this, we know how important inclusion is. If you start with an equitable process, you're far more likely to have an equitable outcome. And while face-to-face meetings and human scale interaction is vital, being forced into this virtual environment opened our eyes to the fact that it is an additive to our process that expands inclusion, is a tool, a lever bar for equity, for those folks who are procedurally challenged, who can't get to a meeting at City Hall at 2 o'clock in the afternoon because they're working. Things like that, that by being able to open up space for them that's on their time and their space to interact in their community has been a very uplifting and an optimistic experience from my point of view.
Wow. Thanks so much, Scott and Monica. Your efforts to collaborate through this process were really such an amazing thing. Monica, you demonstrated your prowess, your and Jim's prowess with this mural tool, and I don't think the screen really does justice on how cool this is, so I put the link up so people can zoom in and see the depth of this document. It's like 4 dimensions, and you captured so much of the thinking of your meetings, the processes, and it's such a work of art. So thank you guys so much for that. We're going to kick it off to Catherine Pinehart, who is one of our tool providers, our experts who did a webinar leading up to the tool challenge. She's quite established in studying what is the interactions between climate resiliency and community. And so she's kind of observing your project and wanted to give a few words of encouragement and thought.
Thank you. Hi there, everyone. I was really particularly excited to hear more about this project because as a former employee of Project Proposal involved in the Wuhan Placemaking Declaration, I was part of the team that helped draft it and was there for the event where it kind of came into effect. It was a very exciting event to be a part of. It's really cool to see adapted to a climate change and a lens that is sensitive to today, whether that's COVID-19 or resilience. Because of course, I was very focused on equity and inclusion and access, but you've taken it even further and taken those lenses and refined them to the challenges that you're looking to face with climate adaptation. So I was really excited to learn more about this, and I'll definitely be looking at your link more closely with the mural.
Awesome. And then Scott, maybe you could tell just in 1 minute, what are the next steps with the Wuhan Placemaking Declaration adaptation, and how can people learn more if they want to start their own on that?
Sure. Well, it's been a challenging time, and now we have this mound of data that I am responsible to go through and begin to discern where the trends, where the arcs are, and how they compare to the original and where we want to get. That being said, is to create some draft language where we can reconvene the group and talk seriously about what words will be incorporated. All the thoughts are out there. So we have a final filtering that will be 1 or 2 more inclusive processes that Monica and I are working on. I expect, and when we do, we can use the network to announce to the world that we're coming back, and we'll hold 1 or 2 more sessions, I will say before the end of June, to get that wrapped up. In the meanwhile, I've been announcing to various stakeholders and leaders in the community that this is in the works. And I'm going to drop off just before 1 to get on a call with the Institute for Sustainable Communities about them getting involved in this as well. They reached out to me just yesterday, and that's why I got a little jammed up for this call today. But there again, they've asked to work together, not on beyond Wuhan, on heat island and climate change effects in equity challenged communities. So a lot is coming out of this. Yay.
Well, that's fantastic. Keep us posted. We're very interested to see how that continues to evolve. And thanks for all your leadership and energy. You put a lot of energy into this and brought a lot of really cool people into the process locally. So, all right, we've been to Florida, we've been to Michigan. We're going to stay in the US and visit with Tina Govan.
5-year out, you would be in a negative position within that, and I've been a part of, but in your budget process, you do have a forecasted budget process, and spending that, it has forecasted that by the 3rd year of your 5-year out, you would be in a negative position within that, and the year 2025, you'd actually be in the red within your fund balance. Those are the finance projections. Despite all of that, we did move forward. We have looking and mindful that IDS has done their work around the 2 areas of required work that the council's heard from the city attorneys, of maintenance and improvements and the electrical structural repairs, all of those having certain deadlines and certain status quo. So knowing that council had provided a $7 million allocation, knowing what our obligations were, we started to look at the limitations of funding and what that would mean. So in the last 2 weeks, we have been aggressively going after the direction, particularly after last week's meeting with council, where council gave somewhat clear direction that it was expected to see movement and activity. That was followed up by very specific direction from the mayor to move forward in a different manner, not one that would look at total necessary and critical work of $16.6 million, but breaking this into phasing, utilizing the limitations of the $7 million funding. That resulted in the work, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen here as Vince prepares his work. That resulted in very quick and aggressive cooperation from Mr. Ringo and DPW, Mr. Ballin and others, John Clark, the city attorney, to provide access to the Phoenix Center itself. Working within the limitations of a $7 million cap on funding, absent some of those other alternative investment scenarios that I'm still really strongly pursuing, but they're not materializing as of yet. We really had to rethink this. Vince will go through very briefly how we rethought that. One of them is that now 2 categories of work that will get done and work that will not get done, and the cost factor for that sort of cost. So Vince, I'm going to turn it over to you. I want to try to save, if there are any questions of council, a couple minutes at the end. So I'm going to talk.
So I have wondrous memories in Whittier. It began, that's where my love of libraries began. We had a Pontiac public librarian, because the library was over here. It is now the Arts Center. Her name was Miss Antona. She was with the Pontiac Public Library, and she came, I'm going to say, every Wednesday to the Whittier Elementary at certain hours, and we would go in there, learn the Dewey Decimal System, have reading time, blah, blah, blah. I remember dominating the sessions because I would always...
True to form.
I didn't just...
The dominator.
I didn't just get crazy. I would always take the subject to the history of baseball. Asked me a question about history of baseball, but that's another subject. Miss Antona was also the citizenship liaison for the library. They conducted citizenship classes at the library. I'm sorry.
Bet you were good.
I love, that's where my love affair.
There we go.
I mean, because like one of the things, I used to bicycle to the Pontiac Library during the summer and read 10 books because they would take us to a baseball game. I'd read 10 books, go to a major league baseball game, not your just regular run-of-the-mill baseball game.
What, down to the Tigers?
Down to Tiger Stadium. I love baseball.
For 10 bucks.
Read 10 books. Yeah. Something like that. I might be.
So you would read 10 books and you would get a ticket?
Yes.
Nice.
And they would take us. They would take us to the game.
Wow. That's very cool.
I mean, I love.
Better go back to that, don't you think?
As I'm sitting here articulating this, I'll bet you the Tigers.
Right now.
I'll bet you the Tigers would give the live. I'll bet you.
Of course, you don't have to bet me.
I'll bet you
You still owe me.
So,